What are some good questions to ask the head of the bank? I'm going to go into some events where the president is speaking at. Okay. I think it's a lot of the same questions you've been asking other senior bankers at these networking events, dude. I know you've been talking to a bunch of MDs. Like, I don't think it's that different. I mean, I guess the only difference is like he's literally the president. So I guess if he's the president, I don't know. The only thing I would say is like, hey, if you have time, maybe look through their investor relations presentations, which they release probably once a quarter. Sometimes more if they go to like, certain conferences or events that they have to present at, like investor conferences and things like that. But I would look through that. And I would also definitely look up the guy's name. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but look up his name, just see like he's probably been interviewed on TV or even in like, articles like Bloomberg or like whatever. If he's done any interviews, see if you can just grab any sort of soundbite or of something he said that's relatively recent and then try to ask him about that, right? That's always a good thing to do. But aside from that, like nothing super different than what like a typical MD would be. Like maybe you can ask him something about, I don't know, the firm's strategic direction in the next 3 to 5 years, like something along those lines. But because obviously that's something that in his role, he probably has to think about all the time. Whereas like a normal MD is probably not thinking about that. And they're just thinking about like, bringing in deals. Right. Maybe you ask him, like, I don't know what his background is. I don't know if he's like always been at PWP and used to be just like a normal senior banker and he kind of worked his way up to, become president. But you can also ask him how his responsibilities have changed, going from X to Y. I would personally probably ask him something around what he attributes like most of his success to. Because like the level of success that he has obtained is, I would say, not normal. Right. When I say not normal, I mean like his career is like pretty exceptional, right? Like he's like the top 1% of the top 1%, right? Like how many people end up becoming like the president of one of the top investment banks in the world, right? So obviously there have been many, many people, I'm sure, that have had careers on Wall Street and probably aspired to get to that level, but there are very few people that have ever actually achieved it. The number one thing I would be curious about is like, hey, what do you attribute that level of success to the most? Or like if there's like one thing, obviously there's a lot more than one thing, I'm sure, that caused him to be so successful, but like, is there something that he feels like he did better than other people or that he did that other people just didn't do that enabled him to get to that level? I don't know. Like that personally, like genuinely, that's the one thing that I would want to know if I was talking to the guy. Right. So, like, I mean, my advice for a lot of you too is like, when you're asking these people questions, just like think genuinely about like, what would you actually want to know about them? Or what would you want to know from them? And this is someone who's very successful in a field that you're trying to have a career in. And so it's very, very rare that you're going to get an opportunity to talk to someone like that. So like, if this is the only opportunity that you have to ask this person a question, if you could only ask them one thing, like, what would you want to know? Like start there with this brainstorming exercise. Like, what is the one thing that I would want to know? If I can only, this is the only time I'm ever going to meet and talk to this guy ever. What would I want to know? Right. And it just like ask that because that's going to be a lot more genuine. Right. And typically, like if your question is genuine, it's always going to be a better question. That's what I would want to know, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you would want to know. Right. So maybe you want to know something else. I don't know. One kind of like easy question that I feel like you can always ask senior bankers, no matter who they are or what their title is or whatever, could be something along the lines of like, hey, knowing what you know now, having worked in the industry for however many years, 20 plus years, what is the best piece of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self back when you were first, starting out in this industry? Having seen all the things you've seen, having learned all the things you learned, and in hindsight, with the experience that you have now, what would you want to tell your younger self? I mean, because in a way, that's just like whatever he would want to tell his younger self, like that's probably going to be good advice for you too, right? Because you are where he was 20 years ago. Like something along those lines, that could work too. So yeah, those are some ideas, but I'm sure there are others.
Hey, if you like this video, click the like button and hit subscribe to get more content like this.